I have with me, I'll make the introductions here, Bjarne Tellmann, Senior Vice President and General Counsel of Pearson. They're the world's leading learning business, a FTSE 100 company with 40,000 employees working in more than 70 countries. So welcome. Have I got it right? Bjarne. Bjarne.
Right.
Yeah, okay, that's fantastic. Howard, Chief Counsel Corporate of BG Group. He's responsible for BG Group's corporate activities globally. Most recently participated in the Executive Steering Committee in relation to the $70 billion offer for Shell, which is now completed. So you're here for a rest, are you?
We'll see.
And then at the end we have David Bateson, who's Senior Vice President, Legal, IP and Sustainability for Canon Europe. He's got loads of experience across industries, electronics, IT services, software, market research and law firms. He's a member of Canon Europe Operating Committee, comprising CEO and heads of business groups and support functions. So off we go, straight into the session. First of all, as clients, I'd like to understand the challenges you face as in-house counsel within your particular industry and what you're looking for from your law firms. As you know, your audience pretty much largely comprises all business support professionals, am I right? Yeah? Yeah. So how can you help us to support our lawyers to actually provide the services for you? So let's start with you, Bjarne.
Right. Can everyone hear me? Great. So, I think just take a step back and look at the landscape and try to understand what's changed in the last few years in terms of the legal profession, because I think that informs what we as clients expect from our counsel and what we're looking for. So if you think about it, at least in my view, I think there is a bit of a tension or a dichotomy taking place. On the one hand, what you're seeing is a dramatic increase in the amount of work that exists out there. If you think about legislation that's passed, anti-bribery and corruption rules, data protection and so forth, you have this huge spike in demand. But at the same time, a lot of law firms are struggling, particularly at the middle end of the spectrum, to get enough work. And young lawyers are coming out not getting traineeships and so forth. So how is that happening? What's going on? And I think there are two trends that really are feeding that. On the one hand, you have an unbundling taking place of what law firms used to sell. Services are that law firms used to do everything from sort of commodity end work to the very high end. That's unbundling, and it's unbundling because of technology, and it's unbundling because of globalization. And those two forces mean that you have now alternative service providers who are increasingly working at the commodities end, and they're moving up the scale. They're getting better and better at delivering not just document review, but also legal temps that are moving up the value chain and providing quite a good service. You have offshoring. I get contacted almost on a daily basis from people in India who are prepared to provide services. You have South Africa, you have Belfast here in the UK, and so forth. Law firms themselves, or legal departments, I should say, are increasingly insourcing value-added work, and that's being aided by that second trend in technology. We have a lot of tools today that we didn't have 10 years ago. We have e-billing services, we have contract management systems, and so forth. So, if you look at that landscape and you look at the unbundling that's happening and the many different choices that we as customers have now that we didn't have a few years ago, I think that what we're really looking for from traditional law firms is people who are willing to be business partners, people who are willing to and able to understand what it is that makes them unique. What is your unique selling proposition? Why should I pay a premium for a law firm to do something? What is it that you add that some of these other providers don't add? And really people who are willing to be strategic partners, thinking more in the long term, and thinking about how to make my life easier. I guess that's where I'd say move away from black letter and really sort of the commodity end of it, and really focus more on service delivery and quality.
Howard, you're operating in a very different industry. Is your perspective the same as Bjarne's?
It is, and actually it's quite interesting. So the oil and gas industry has a there's a metric which everyone can see, which is the oil price. And actually, in the industry, essentially profitability varies dependent on the oil price. And I think actually some of the trends that you're referring to, we see in a low oil price environment, which is where we are today. And oil and gas companies are generally regarded to be preparing for a lower for longer environment. So what that means for the legal function, which is we don't like to say it, was a sort of cost, we're not pumping oil out of the ground, we're sort of a cost centre, is we need to be smarter, and we need to respond to price pressure from the FD. How can we keep costs down? And we look to our law firms to help us do that, and is one way of doing it. And we sort of look to them to think, to feel some of the pain of a low oil price environment. The winners are the winning law firms are the ones that do that. The loser law firms are the ones that sort of wander in, don't seem to realise that there's a big impact from $150 to $50 oil. And then we use some of the things that you're talking about, which is insourcing, and particularly one of the things that we're really focused on in the industry generally is to ensure that the work that the lawyers are doing in or out of the function is the right sort of work. Often the legal function is the sort of home of the people that can draft things or the people that can check things and so on and so forth. So we're really pushing back to try and ensure that the work we do and the work our lawyers are doing, internally and externally, is the right sort of work, and that really adds value to the business. So for the external world, it's a real challenge, and you need to be smarter, you need to be fixed into what think about what we're thinking about, what's keeping the general counsel awake at night, and when I turn up at a pitch, we're a big procurer of legal services, what are we looking for, what are we thinking about? M&A is, in the M&A world, it's an easy example because people understand it. The transactional piece, most people can do that, most law firms can do that, but who's coming to talk about anti-bribery? What's the risk of anti-bribery? Who's talking about the people bit? The bits that we're not sure about and the bits that we think you can add value on. So it's a challenging landscape for law firms.
Right, there's a number of things coming out here that we're going to delve into. Pricing pressure, we're starting to talk about innovation, new technologies, the growth of the in-house legal team. So we're going to pick up those things. But I'd really like to hear from David as well. Again, coming from a very different industry. So are your experiences the same as your panel members are talking about?
They're similar. I mean, we are a big company, but we're not a big procurer of legal services like Howard sounds like Howard is. I mean, for me, the pressure to reduce costs has just got more and more, become more and more prevalent over the years. I've been at Canon for 10 years. 10 years ago, I don't think I was ever thinking about costs particularly. We had a budget, we had enough money that we needed to hire people internally and to use external resources. I never had discussions really about budgets, and now I feel like that's all I ever talk about is budgets and cost saving, and so the pressure is huge. And each year we save some costs, and then it feels a bit like an anaconda, where it just tightens that year, and then the next year that's your benchmark for that year, and then you have to save a little bit more off that. So it really is a challenge. I think just pragmatically, law firms generally cost more than in-house employees. I have a very good team. They're very experienced. They know the business very well. They know how to present legal advice in a way that actually delivers value and moves the business forward. So for me, law firms are really the last resort. I mean, I only go to a law firm when I absolutely have to, and that's not meant to sound rude to anybody in the room, but it's just a fact. With the resources I have to deal with, it's a last resort for me. And so when I do go to a law firm, then I expect something pretty special. Maybe we're going to come on to that and give some ideas about what I see as special. So
let's just start on the pricing point. It's one of the themes of this conference. What are you seeing? Because a lot of people, I'm marketing director of a law firm, so I'm sat there, working with my lawyers. We're trying to we're trying to ensure that we get the right price for high quality legal services. So we will be pushing to say, well, you want that high quality, there's a price to pay for it. But you're saying, look, I'm under loads of pressure here from budgets. Sharpen your pencils and bring that price down. So what are you seeing from your law firms? What's good? What's bad? How can we support our lawyers again with regard to price?
Yeah. I think it varies depending on whether it's an M&A transaction or litigation or it's just a one-off piece of advice. But I think generally the feeling is it just costs too much. That unfortunately that's just the feeling that I have. And I know there are options around fixed costs. Even there, it feels like the fixed cost. You think, well, what's behind that? And actually, that sounds quite high. And unfortunately, because I've come from a tradition of hourly rates, you can't help but do the maths and think, that actually sounds like a lot of hours or a high hourly rate, even when the law firm's offering a fixed cost. So.
Bjarne, did you want to just add something?
Yeah, I just have one thought there. I think you mentioned alternative fee arrangements, and I think that's the buzzword, right?
That's interesting. I'm going to interrupt here. As a law firm, we've been talking about alternative fee arrangements for years and years, and I would say, in our defence, we talk about fixed fees, we talk about capped fees, we talk about risk-related fees as well. And then quite often we find that our clients revert back to we talk about hourly rates because I think that's the point I just wanted to make, which is that I think at some level it all comes back to the hourly rate. No matter how much we all try to get away from it, it just comes back to different ways of slicing and dicing the hourly rate. And I think that for me, I think what would really be value add is to just literally move away from that and focus more on the output rather than the input. So when I buy anything, when I buy a car, just think about last time you went to purchase a car or any product. You don't have a discussion with the salesperson about how the number of hours they put into building the car and what their overhead is, and I don't care what your overhead is. I just want to know, am I getting value for money? And so I think try to disaggregate the price you're charging from the service you're offering, the price you're charging from the inputs that you are putting in to provide that service. And so maybe take your lead from McKinsey. I use McKinsey from time to time, or from bankers when we do capital markets work. McKinsey has a very similar price structure to a law firm. You have professionals who are highly paid. You've got to figure out how to generate enough work to pay their high salaries. They never tell you, well, it's going to cost you X because we have these inputs. It's going to take 100 hours to do that. No, they simply say, here's what we're going to offer you. Over the course of the next 10 weeks, we'll design this and this model. We're going to, and here are the outputs that you will get, and this is the price, £70,000. And then you get sticker shock and you say, well, gee, that's great, except that I don't have £70,000, I've got £20,000. And then they go back and revise that output based on the price. So why couldn't that model work for law firms? Instead of telling us what your input is, focus on the output. You must see RFPs all the time, and so I'd say naively, again, as the person supporting lawyers, don't we pitch to you in that way, Howard? You're not.
Well, I've been party to some dramatically poor RFPs and some dramatically good RFPs, and I will give you some. I was thinking about this on the way here. I was give you some tips to try and boil this right down. These guys have got it spot on in the way they're analysing it. The first thing you've got to do if you're going to pitch for work, price is critical, but for heaven's sake, be prepared when you arrive. Who are you speaking to? Who's going to be making the decision about this procurement exercise? And there are different ways to do that. If you've got intelligence within the company, use that intelligence. If you're going to be seeing one of us three, try and find somebody in their organisation if you can, and speak to them. How do they look at things? What sort of person do they like to deal with? So that's the first thing. Be prepared. The second thing is that one of the issues that we have, these guys may agree, is try and be flexible about who you put forward for a pitch. You may have somebody within, and we use a number of these law firms in the room. You may have somebody that you believe is the relationship partner for a particular company. But think, who is it that's in the room? Is that person a good fit with this guy? Your relationship partner may be best friends with the general counsel, but who's actually making the decision? Who's making the procurement decision? If I'm working, if we're mandating someone for a capital markets transaction, the person in my team that does that is an extremely capable person, but she's relatively young, dare I say it. So don't bring in a partner who's 55, because it ain't going to be a good fit.
We've only got partners who are 55. Anyway, carry on.
So think, try and, and it's very difficult. Try and get intelligence.
Can I jump in there, because I think there are two points there that I think are really, really good, and I couldn't agree with you more. The first is being mindful about who you address in the room. I am the general counsel, and we've just gone through a large panel selection process here in the UK. And one of the things that frustrated me, and actually frustrated my team, was that some of the firms that came in focused on me the entire time and completely ignored the people I was delegating that decision to, and particularly a lot of the women in the room. You had sort of male partners that came in and just focused on the men in the room and had their back turned to the female who actually was the decision maker that I delegated that decision to. So guess who didn't get picked? So that's one thing. The second, to your point about who to bring in, rainmaker's always a bad idea. As soon as I see a rainmaker, I know it's a rainmaker. This is the guy with the bright white teeth who I'll never see again. And I'm more interested in who's actually going to do the work. I'll call out Cleary Gottlieb just because I thought it was really impressive. A couple of weeks ago, we had an RFP in New York. They show up with two very high-powered partners and a very young female associate. And the first question we kicked it off with was, why should we select you for this work? And the partner turned to the associate and said, why don't you tell them?
I bet she loved him for that, but go on.
But really impressive, right? I mean, they trust the junior associate to articulate what it is about the firm that's special, what's different, and she did a brilliant job. So, really think about who you bring, I guess is the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, interesting to hear you guys say that, because we have had periods years ago of doing a formal panels, but actually the volume of work we do doesn't really justify the effort involved in going through that process. But one tip I would just give is we have used a law firm, I won't say who it is, but on a kind of informal arrangement basis, and they invited me to go and speak at one of their conferences, which I did in my time, and I know a few people from there, but the main contact partner who had come to see me didn't recognise me and did completely blank me while I was there, and I just thought, well, that's pretty poor, that in any situation. So I think just a basic. I'm sure nobody in the room would do that, but it happens. Just to say that it happens, and it's left me with a pretty poor impression.
And it happens so often. I mean, being sort of managing a marketing department where we do so many events, the amount of times that our partners, our lawyers think, well, you've managed the event, I don't even need to turn up to it. It's unbelievable.
I had actually horror story. I mean, one of the two firms that I actually worked for in the past did a bid for us and came, and they had no idea that I'd ever worked for the firm. They hadn't taken the time to actually just read my CV online.
I mean, talk about horror stories. I went to. Use this as. I went to a pitching for counsel on a very, very large infrastructure deal in Australia. Be careful, and one of the firms that pitched, it was quite obvious, didn't know one another on the other. They didn't really know who. I could see them sort of looking at each other, trying to remember the name, because they'd just done through a merger or whatever they'd done down there, and we were sort of looking at them, thinking these guys don't actually know who's even each other. Never mind. And so these are very difficult decisions. We understand these are very difficult decisions for law firms. It's very difficult for somebody in the law firm to go to a partner who thinks he's the big man and he's sort of, earning a load of money, and to tell him, listen, your face does not fit with this client, and I know that. I know that must be very challenging.
It goes back to what you were saying about being prepared, right? And really, the ones who work are the ones who really think it through. And the other is, in terms of being prepared, comes back to what I said earlier about really understanding what it is that makes you unique. I would encourage you to make sure that the people going to do the pitch can answer the question, why should I choose you? What's different about you? And I can't tell you how many times you get that bog standard, boring, we're a dynamic, innovative firm that has, because we're so connected and we love each other. It just sounds the same. So what is it that really is different? What is that thing that's different about your culture, about your expertise? Why should I hire you? And if you can't answer that, then I submit you do an offsite and figure out what it is.
We should walk away from the pitch.
Yeah.
Say we can't differentiate. I managed a pitch with a group of partners, asked that very question, and said what is going to unseat the incumbent? And they said, well, they're a great firm. I said, okay, fine. So what differentiates us? Well, it doesn't. And they still carried on with the pitch. And guess what? We didn't win it. And the incumbent stayed in. We should not have.
And that's what we all do as businesses.
Yeah.
I mean, Canon will not pitch for things. We qualify bids, and if we don't think we can win it, we don't bid. We don't waste time. Yeah,
that makes sense.
So we've won the. Oh, sorry. Did somebody have a question?
Leon Geyser from Linklaters. I'm a legal project manager with the team. Howard, you've trained at a law firm, so you've had a few remarks as to how they approach, obviously, their pitches. To what extent were you part of that culture when you were at the law firm? And what did you do to change it?
Well, it feels like a lifetime ago, but in so many ways. But when I was at Clifford Chance before the first sort of crash, and in those days, and things are very different today, the work just turned up, and actually pitching was important, but in a much more old-fashioned way of going down the pub and going for drinks. And you know what, nowadays my team don't want to go for a drink really. They will do if we ask them nicely, and you put a lot of effort into a function, then we'll tell them to go. But generally you've got to be thinking, what do they want to be doing? Does a team of people want to be just going to a pub with a bunch of people? Probably not. You need to think, what's a more interesting thing to do? How can we get these people to turn up? How can we get them to think of our firm as partners in a different way? Now, these are challenging discussions and challenging things internally, and I've said to many firms, because we get the same calls, all of us, I'm sure, and what can we do for you? What can I do for you? And the real question is, well, that's fine, but you need to think about what's different about you. What is it? Why should I go for a coffee? What is it that you're doing?
What would be interesting to me would be if someone said, or if someone indicated, I've spent the time to really understand your business, and I see an opportunity here that you're not addressing in the most efficient or effective way, and I'd like to take 10 minutes of your time to explain to you how I can make your life better in relation to this issue. That would be impressive to me. And that, by the way, that's what the alternative service providers are doing on a daily basis. And they're moving up the value chain.
And what other things? Because I mean, we're starting to move into this. What can I do for you? And this talks. We're seeing so many RFPs. People are asking. You're asking us to be innovative. You're asking us to add value. So from your perspectives, what do you really see? Okay, this is value add. I mean, you've touched on it, Bjarne. Or this is different. This is innovative. What are you seeing?
It's very hard, because I think, I was going back to what I said at the beginning. I see law firms as essential, of course, but really are there to provide a service to me. So I just want that service delivered in as cost efficient way as possible. With clear advice. If it's a project, manage the project efficiently. All the things that we have to do within my organisation. So, I guess in a way, there's no magic to it. You're a service supplier, like I am as well. So, it's just thinking about it in that sense. How would I go? And giving advice. So, just one last point.
Yeah.
Advice that I've had that I would pull out as a good example is something that I could actually take a memo and just give it to my CEO as it is. That came from a law firm, and I could give it as it is. Very, very rare. An example yesterday of one of the lawyers in my team, who's very senior, who had some legal advice from a law firm, and he couldn't really understand it. He said he'd have to go and do some research himself. He couldn't work out what the answer was. So that was, about as far as you can get from something that he couldn't even show it to me, never mind me show it to the CEO. So, that's just an example of try and put yourself in the shoes of people who are doing our jobs, I guess.
And in a pitch, think about that. We have our law firms, some of them in the room. We tell them, when you present us with a piece of advice, we need you to do it in this format. So the first 3 lines that we're all going to read, make sure it's got the advice in it, and we need an answer. And so in a pitch, if you're happy with that approach, say it. Say, when we give you a piece of advice, we're going to do it in this format. And people in the room may think, well, that's good, isn't it? Because we know that if we don't do it in that format, then send it back and you won't pay. And show some real rigor. I mean, we force sound quite passionate about this, but we force our law firms to behave in a certain way, because it reflects badly on us. To get a piece of advice that you're paying for that you can't share is actually bad news for me, for us. Because what?
Yeah. I would say there's probably 2. I agree with all the points. I think they're really valid. I think two dimensions. One, if you're pitching for a specific project, I think it's really important to demonstrate innovative thinking in how you might execute that project. So just an example that I saw recently, a law firm came in and said, okay, we've done a lot of projects similar to the one that you're asking us to pitch for. But let us give you an example by just describing what happened in the deal from hell, right? So it started out as a private placement. But within 48 hours, it turns out that it's going to require a public offering, and then there's a huge tax component that wasn't there before. And so we drew together, our Australian team and our U.S. team, and in 48 hours we had a public offering document. We had restructured the deal to make sure the tax thing was dealt with. That's impressive. That's innovative, and it's very much on point with the specific thing that you're pitching for. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, we've just got a question here.
Thanks, Linda. Geraint Evans from CMS. Just a very quick question coming back to the relationship point, and to ask a similar question to one that was asked of the audience earlier. I'd like to get the panel's views on the management of the relationship, and the management of the relationship by either the partner who is doing the work with you directly, or the management of the relationship by a professional account manager, director.
Great question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I have actually relationships with both. So I have some very good relationships with law firm COOs. And I think what I was going to say a second ago was, in addition to the specific pitch, you have sort of the general relationship pitch. And I think on that one, the COO can play a huge role, because one of the things that a law firm COO can do that might help me is give me the perspective of someone who's not just interfacing with one company, but with 200 companies. And so giving me ideas about how I might leverage my technology better, how I might integrate my technology with the law firms, how I might use big data coming from the law firm to act as tripwires for issues that are coming on the horizon. So that's one. Obviously, having a close relationship with the law firm account partner is good. I have monthly meetings, usually just a coffee with the managing partner on the main law firm that we work with. I think that's important. And then another piece that I think is very innovative and helpful is some law firms actually have hired former GCs. There's one law firm that we work with who has hired the former general counsel of American Express. She was the GC there for 20 years. That's extremely helpful for me. I have someone that, it's a very lonely place where I sit. I don't really have the opportunity to brainstorm with somebody on my team, because everyone's got an agenda. And I don't necessarily have that opportunity with law firm partners who don't know what I live every day. But having someone on the law firm side who's been in my shoes in an even bigger company for 20 years, that's that's value add. So just a couple of thoughts on that.
I think you're touching on as well. What about, I hate this word, a non-lawyer? It's like a non-person actually managing the relationship in terms of sort of the account management side, but also the eliciting client feedback, post-transaction review.
I think the
Any
question
thoughts?
is what do you mean by relationship? Because I sometimes I think we sound like we're a bit different, Canon, from these guys than in terms of budget, because we don't have this. I understand that you are in businesses as well, and you can't invest vast amounts of time speculatively having meetings with people like me if there's not a level of fees being driven in return. But I think some of the things that Bjarne mentioned actually sound great. I mean, I think they would be fantastic to have, and it doesn't take up a lot of time, I don't think, to do that kind of thing. But I don't really want a relationship as such, unless there's some huge transaction going on, because it just takes up my time. And I mean, like these guys, we have limited amount of time, and we've talked earlier about costs and alternative fee arrangements. I don't want to go back to that, but that takes time to manage. So many of these things sound appealing, but when you've got many things to do, many different stakeholders to keep happy, some of these things are just, they sound great, but you think, I just don't have time to do that. So for me, a relationship has to be kind of there when I need it. It sounds a bit like a one-way street, I know, but I guess as far as I'm the customer, that's how I like it.
And I think you need to, I would encourage the law firms to just continue thinking. It's not as to what's appropriate. And I do understand the vested interests within a law firm, that one particular partner may have a relationship with one particular person, but somehow someone independently, and I suspect it is a non-fee earner, needs to look at it and say, well, is that still relevant?
Yeah.
Is that person still procuring legal services? I mean, our general counsel's, very important guy. Does he spend any money? Is he responsible for something? Well, we've just had a big takeover. He's responsible for that, but really on a day-to-day basis, no, he's not. So I think you need to keep moving. People change, people in accountable positions change, and you've got to take big decisions. There have been examples that we've had where very established, long-standing relationships have been destroyed because the law firm hasn't moved quickly enough to reflect changes in the management or changes in the legal function.
Yeah, I think also just to your original question, I think if law firms are going to take seriously the notion that they're a business, then they should think seriously about having a full-time CEO running that business. Not a professional who's practicing law, but a professional who's actually running a large professional services organization, a global, in many cases.
Huge organisations.
Right.
Huge organisations.
So that, I think, would clarify very quickly, what do we do well, what don't we do, why should you hire us, what's our value add, what's our USP, what's our mission, all of the things that law firm partners don't have time or really the expertise to answer. Just one other point, and maybe we're moving into technology to a certain extent, but I think if you think about value add and what you can give to the relationship and how you can partner in a way that's on-off, that doesn't take a lot of time. I think about that commodities end of the spectrum and what you can give away for free, because it will come back again for you. So 2 examples. DLA, actually, I'll call out, has a wonderful tool that leverages big data, and they've got, I don't know how many millions of contracts from around the world that they put into a database. You can put your contract through that database and x-ray your contract, and it will tell you on a scale of 1 to 10 whether your governing law clause is an 8 or a 4, right? That's actually quite useful. As I have to go to my CEO and explain, well, this governing law clause, he says, well, is it, is how strict is it? And you've got to come with some qualitative judgment. His eyes glaze over after about 5 minutes. If I could just go in and say, look, based on a comparison of 20 million documents that are similar, it's an 8. And he says, well, dial it down to a 5. Okay, that's kind of innovative and useful. Another example, another law firm has put on the cloud a tool that allows you to click on a menu for labor law and say, I want to print out a memo that compares and contrasts German, Spanish, and UK labor law on these points. You click the box, you hit go, and it generates a memo and it spits it out of your printer, and it's free. That's because PLI is doing that, by the way, on a subscription basis. So why not give it away? And you're undercutting that, and you're building a relationship.
I think we're in the last couple of minutes, aren't we? Yeah, that's right. So I'd like us all. Gosh, there's so much. I mean, we could have gone on for hours, couldn't we? So, just from three of you, just your closing thoughts. If you could ask your law firms to stop doing something or start doing one thing, what would it be, David?
Well, I'm sorry to say, stop charging so much. that's the honest answer. And start. You know, I don't want, as any of us, none of us intend to sound like we're trying to beat everybody up here. This is genuinely, hopefully, constructive feedback, because we all need law firms, and we recognise you provide a very valuable service. But clear, concise advice that gives solutions, that evaluates risk. I like the idea Bjarne mentioned, and some law firms do that. Just giving scores out of 10 is very helpful to evaluate where does it stand in terms of risk. Do what we ask for. Don't give me a 10-page memo when I ask for a 1-page memo, and give a view on whether you'd go through a various solutions. Say, if it was me, I'd do this. I'm not going to sue anybody for telling me that you'd go that way or that way. It's my decision or the business decision. But give me a view on, if it was your money, which solution would you adopt?
Howard?
I was going to say something quite similar. I was going to say, stop sitting on the fence. It is important to hear the expertise of a highly paid advisor. Most other advisors will provide an opinion, and so law firms should do the same. And I think start proactively managing relationships. The best relationship we have with a law firm is because the partner really proactively manages it. He knows what the changes in the organisation are, he knows who wants what, he knows who the personalities of the individuals that are making decisions. So proactively manage the relationships and take big decisions internally. And if there's an old partner hanging around who thinks he's got a relationship, then someone may need to have a conversation with him and say, listen pal, things have changed.
I would say, I think it comes back to sort of stop being a professional services firm and be a business. And, one thing I would encourage you to do, I think if I were going to have an away day with my partners, and I was going to really think about why do we exist, I would really try to pick apart the underlying assumptions. If you think, I was reading recently about the airline industry, and Southwest Airlines, which by the way was founded by a lawyer, and what they did was they asked the question, what are the underlying assumptions of the airline industry that we haven't really ever noticed before? Well, assumption number one, that it has to be a hub and spoke system, right? Assumption number two, that you have to have different types of planes for long distance and short haul. Assumption number three, that it's a bundled package of services that you're offering, the meal, the seat, whatever. And then they said, which of those assumptions are ripe for disruption? Well, actually all of those, right? We don't need a hub and spoke. We can do from point to point. We can actually buy just one fleet of 1,000 aircraft that are all exactly the same size. Actually turns out to be really cost effective. We can unbundle the price of the ticket. So if you just want no meal and a cheap price, you could get that. If you want more baggage and whatever, you can add that on. And that completely disrupted that space. So what are the underlying assumptions that your law firm is resting its business model on without really reflecting on it, and disrupt those?
What a great way to close, disrupt. Thank you so much.